Well, hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and so last week on Revolutionary Girl Utena was an episode. But I'm excited because usually when you have a crazy episode, especially a Nanami-centered crazy episode, that means that the following episode or episode arc is probably going to be insane. So, yeah! But I have a lot of comments to get through before we even start episode 17, so we need to just dive into the comments and go from there. So, Kronos, talks about how Dios, or the way that it's spelled in Greek, is actually Greek for Zeus. In its genitive form, as I remember correctly, it's also related to anything divine. We kind of got the inflection about the divine, I think, this series. The relation to Zeus is interesting because Zeus is like the big daddy on Mount Olympus, kind of the father of all of the gods and goddesses. So I've been thinking of Dios as more of like a divine presence, like a godly power, so that would tie into it relatively well. There's also a lot of sexual connotation with Zeus, so that seems to fit the nature of this show as well. Lucy Althusi 7172, and a lot of these comments are going to be verbatim because I wanted to capture exactly what they were saying and kind of bounce off of it. So Lucy Althusi 7172 says, on a side note, I love Miki's line comparing the way Toga in episode 11 treats Nanami to a pet cat. It develops and complicates the story in the previous episode of Nanami and the cat to think of Nanami as the cat herself, showing her extreme jealousy and possessiveness as ultimately being self-destructive. And yeah, as we saw last episode, in episode 16, Nanami is quite self-destructive and hurts herself more than helps herself in a lot of cases and scenarios. And I feel for Nanami because I would really like for her to get to a place and point where she moves past Toga, kind of realizes she doesn't need Toga, and is able to be her own person and isn't so self-harmful or self-destructive. I would love that for Nanami. That's honestly what I want from her. Same as with Saionji, and ultimately with Toga and the others. We want them to be the best people that they can be. And so I will go ahead and tell you all that it is hurricane season where I'm at. Not hurricane as if I'm on the coast. I'm not. But all the hurricane, it rises up, and all of the rain and torrential downpour eventually gets to where I'm at in the country. So right now it has been raining all day and the wind is blowing. One of my doors outside is kind of rattling. So when it rattles, I think the dogs get concerned. So if my dogs suddenly bark for no reason, it's probably because of the rain from the hurricane that's coming through. Yay. H Banana 7 notes that Toga's life didn't change at all by having Anthy around. He's still playing the field and right in front of her. And this is back in episode 11 and episode 12. Anthy was like a dutiful wife existing just to better his life. While with Utena, her life did change due to Anthy, and they formed a real friendship and more. So yeah, this is H Banana's comment is pretty multi-layered, but yeah, the first thing was Toga really was just using Anthy to better himself, whereas Utena's whole argument was that Anthy made her life better. So that kind of created a different established dynamic of their relationship, which I really liked. They also noted that Choo-Choo's eyes seemed way more panicked than usual with Toga. He wasn't being playful, but he was obsessively eating crackers. I think that's good to note because Choo-Choo was very uncomfortable around Toga because obviously Toga is a very uncomfortable person to be around, especially if you're a lady. But also I thought it was interesting to note that Choo-Choo doesn't even go around Akio. Choo-Choo's not even there. It's like if Choo-Choo is panicked around Toga and uncomfortable around Saionji, but won't even go around Akio, I feel like that is such a ploy by the show to not let us know or have inside information about how we should feel about Akio. I feel uncomfortable by him and his advances towards Anthy. Honestly, I do. But I feel like by not having Choo-Choo there, it is a deliberate choice by the show so that we can't read Choo-Choo's reactions to get an idea of how we should feel about the situation. Seems very deliberate, right? And then H Banana 7 noted that I didn't notice Utena's rose to be pink until this particular duel. Wonder what it means. Anytime somebody says, oh, I wonder what it means, I'm always like, I always get a little uncomfortable because I'm like, that means it's kind of spoilery. Because y'all have seen the show, you obviously know what it means, so quit giving me hints. But to me, I think that it means that it's Utena being herself. Like, she's been the prince persona, having the white rose in the past, And then we have Toga and Akio with the red rose. And then the others have had roses of their own color. But when Utena is finally having a pink rose in this duel, I think it's her being herself. And we talked about that last episode about what that could possibly mean. Zachiel thinks and says that in episode 11, it seems to be the first time we really get a glimpse at Anthy's feelings. It seems that despite her efforts to remain in her role, she actually likes Utena quite a lot. Or in episode 12. Enough to daydream about her and hope she doesn't suffer through the duel. She tells Toga she can wait outside while the student council meets, which, while it fits with the script of her role, is also Anthy trying to create an opportunity to leave Toga under the guise of being polite, which we talked about in the discussion, for sure. It's the first time we've seen her really try to fight for any independence without Utena around, and it's nice to get a peek behind the curtain that makes Anthy start to feel more of a person. That's kind of the thing. I don't know what all being the Rose Bride entails and why. It obviously limits her ability to act for herself. We don't know a lot about Anthy's inner thoughts because we really, other than episode 12 and rarely in previous glimpses, get a chance to see what she's actually thinking. So it's kind of hard to determine. And Anthy has a very, very, very good poker face. So she doesn't really show a lot of that outward expression. We only see it a handful of times. What's interesting to me is that Mamiya, who is with Soji, Mamiya wants to become the Rose Bride. They want their autonomy taken away. And I'm like, but why? And it seems to be tied to wanting power, and Soji's all about it because it will give him power as well. So I'm very fascinated by the concept of Mamiya wanting to have their autonomy taken away. I don't know. We don't know a lot about Mamiya at this point, so it's hard to kind of gauge what that all means. But it seems like if you're the Rose Bride, you're just at the mercy of whoever is engaged to you. And I'm very curious to know why Mamiya would want to be in that position if the power is that good of a reason. We don't know yet, so that's going to be interesting to find out, hopefully, as we go. And then finally, Oliver Jajado talks about how I also love Juri helping Utena and lending her her sword because Toga was almost taunting her when talking about how the final act must end with a prince and princess together, invalidating Juri's wish for her miracle and a happy ending of her own. Yeah, Toga was just kind of like sticking it, like literally and figuratively, with the knife into Juri's back, being like, well, it has to be a man and a woman. Who would want to have two women together? And Juri's just sitting over here like suffering in silence. And then she's like, I'm going to give Utena a sword to kick your ass. So love it. But they also pointed out, saying this is one of my favorite commentaries about what a prince actually is, which is tied to episode 12. 12, for friendship, perhaps. Why did I join that battle, that game in the first place? Referring to the duels over Anthy. Naturally, I would never forget that. And yet, there's no sense of reality to that memory. Who was I exactly? I'm saying this for your sake. How many times did I hear that as a child? Ooh, I like this idea of Utena, reflecting on her telling Anthy, being like, I'm saving you for you and had to help you be a better person. And then she's reflecting on adults telling her that and how condescending maybe she felt that was as a child. And now, lo and behold, she's doing it to Anthy now in episode 12. An adult is not someone who has lived a certain number of years. No, we call someone who can exercise power an adult. Oh, I love that. A prince isn't someone who looks cool, nor, of course, is a prince a girl who dresses as a boy. Oh, a prince is someone who can exercise power. Who is that power for? What is that power for? Who is it for? I stopped seeking to be sought after. That wasn't being true to myself. I want to become someone who can exercise power. I want to become a prince. For friendship, perhaps. Oh, that's great. That's awesome. I love that. Oh, yes. So basically it's Utena being like Toga being a prince, Saionji being a prince, Miki being the prince, Juri. It's all people trying to exercise power and control. And we have talked about that in the past, but I love the idea of Utena saying, I'm tired of being sought after by someone else. That's not me. But I want to become a prince because I want to be someone who can use power for a purpose, maybe even friendship, but to use power. Like, that's the true reason. She's like, I'm not here to try to be a prince saving a damsel in distress. I want to exercise power even if it's for friendship. that's so good. That's so good. Yes, that adds so much to her. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, so we have talked for a good 10 minutes about this episode, but I'm super excited. I hope you all are as well. As I've talked in previous episodes, if you'd like to see Neon Genesis Evangelion or other reactions that I'm doing on the channel right now that might also be tied into ladies loving ladies, you can see various videos on my channel, but I want to give a special shout out and thanks to Anthony for giving me the file for this week to look at this episode. It's been a lot of help. So we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to dive right in and see what all we're going to get and go from there. So we're going to start Revolutionary Girl Utena, episode 17, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do it to it, Lars. Well, I went back and restocked my coffee, but didn't put any extra creamer in it, so it's a little more bitter, which seems to fit. Oh my God, this episode, like I said in the end credits, I can't decide because I think that all of the individual characters in the story have really good individual like solo episodes. I like Miki's. The episodes involving him are always fun. Nanami's are just literally comedic relief. And then you have Juri, who is just like existential pain. I feel so bad for Juri. Also, I feel like I want to like shill you all to Bloom Into You because Bloom Into You handles similar topics to this episode. I would argue in a very complex and layered and relatable way. But I think also Bloom Into You has the advantage of being written in a more modern time set than this one is very much steeped in a lot of prejudice, especially towards people in same-sex relationships, which still persists today. Let's not be, unrealistic. But I think that the way it's talked about, I feel like it's handled on a much more surface level in terms of what they actually say, but then we can dive into it as to the implications that are not like spoken out loud, but they're there, right? Because they couldn't exactly come out and say a lot of things back then and it be accepted in the same way. God, if Deke did the publication, they'd probably say Sayonji and Juri are cousins. But anyway, let's go ahead and talk about this episode. I did not look at the preview, so I have no clue what's coming up next week, and I'm not going to look at the preview. I don't feel the need to go back and relook at the preview for episode 16 because whatever. Although someone did point out that it would be good to go look at the preview for episode 17 to see if we get anything extra, so I'll go ahead and pull that up, and we can go from there. I really like the idea of us starting out with the birdhouse, with the bird cage, because birds are a symbolic element in here. And we obviously know that birds symbolize particularly freedom. How many series use wings of freedom, use birds like, you could even go back to like Aladdin where Jasmine lets the doves loose and it's her freedom to pick whoever she wants to marry. Birds are tied to freedom. And so thus the bird cage being used as literally where Anthe is the entire time is describing this kind of imprisonment or this lack thereof freedom totally for Anthe to be her own person. And for Juri to start out in the bird cage is very indicative of her mainly struggling with the idea that she feels like she's in prison. She's not able, she feels like her love, because we'll put Juri up here. Juri has this problem where she is in love with Shiori, but she cannot express that love for a number of reasons. One, because of the prejudice that is tied to it, but also because of the rejection that goes with it. And we'll talk about Shiori here in this, but there is definitely like, it's kind of like a Schrodinger's cat situation. If Juri tells Shiori that she loves her, there's obviously the stigma of same-sex relationships that is against Juri in this case. It's not like you confess to a guy and it's like, oh, well, no, he turned me down, oh no. But if a woman confesses to you and you feel that there's any type of stigma, there shouldn't be, by and by, any stigma at all, but we don't live in a perfect world. So Juri has this presence and reputation as well. And so, but here's my thing. I don't think in the long run, I'm talking a lot about the prejudice of same-sex relationships. I don't think in the long run that's what Juri's afraid of. Juri has a reputation, and I'm sure Utena might think that it would be a problem because Utena's still struggling with, her dealing with her own issues. But I think Juri's whole deal is that once she puts it out there that she loves this woman, one, she could face rejection, and she anticipates it, that her heart is going to be rejected. But also, I think it's the fact that Juri, in her mindset, knows that it's not mutual, that her love is unrequited, and that she should let it go, but that is a hard sell, right? That's a hard thing to deal with, and I know exactly what Juri, I understand where Juri's coming from. So I'm going to pull up episode 16 real quick and just turn the sound off and go to the preview. And again, thank you, Anthony, for getting that to us so that I can look back at this. But I want to go back and look at the preview for episode 17 and just see if they give us anything we didn't see coming. So it'll take it a little bit a second. I'm on a tiny hot spot and it's not got a lot of juice. So we're just going to let that pull up here real quick. But I'm going to go back to the end credits and see what we get. But in any case, while that's loading up, I do love this whole scenario of Juri in the birdcage in the greenhouse. It's so 90s. Pastel colors, the pinks, the roses, all of it. It's so beautiful. And of course, I love the idea that there's this like sherbet colored peach rose that is literally descriptive of Juri. Now, what's interesting is that Anthony's pretty aware of what's going on, which something that we get out of Anthony that's really interesting is that she is not only aware of Juri's struggle, but she seems pretty understanding of Shiori as well. Which, Anthony was pretty mysterious in this episode. She gives us a little bit of feedback, but she doesn't give us a whole lot. But just her understanding of how things are is pretty interesting in all this. So, all right. I want to go back to our ending here and see what we get. All right, so the preview for episode 17 said here that Juri's childhood friend has transferred here. Well, there we go. So Shiori. Okay. There we go. Shiori. We need to fix that. So it is Shiori. Put her up here because we're going to talk about her later. Are they on good terms or bad terms? That's the question. I don't know what happened, but Juri shouldn't keep holding a grudge for so long. And then they're like, you're rather naive, aren't you, Utena? But Shiori just wants to be friends with Senpai, right? Oh, girl. Oh, man. No, not necessarily. Oh, my gosh. Well, that was nice. So, Thorns of Death. A very apt title in this. And so we have Utena watching Juri face Miki, which Juri's always facing against Miki. And Juri's getting better and better as a swordsman. I like that she's able to channel her emotion into fencing. What's really curious about Juri as a fencer is the idea that she emotionally, under the surface, personally, is pretty unstable with her emotions, especially in regards to her love for Shiori. But she's able to channel herself into her fencing and is calm, cool, and collected, but that does not reflect on her actual, real life position with what's going on. And I think that's, again, Utena seems to struggle sometimes with understanding how complex people are, and Anthy seems to understand that people are very complex, and that there's that whole, I know this metaphor has been thrown around a lot in the last couple of years, but the idea of there's two wolves inside of you. There's this part of you that wants to do this, and this part of you wants to do that. Yeah, people are complex. We have multiple desires and thoughts about whether or not we should go after those desires, right? So we're going to talk more about that as we go, but I like that we instantly have Shiori just showing up. She's just right there. She's transferred back. Isn't that fun? And Utena and Anthy are like, oh, hey, you're here, purple-haired girl. How's that going? Interestingly enough, both Shiori and Kozu have purple hair like Anthy. Do I think that that's coincidence? No. It was a very nice way to tie Anthy into those two characters back during the first act and why Juri and Miki wanted the Rose Bride. It was a very convenient way of thematically tying her to those characters. Now it's just very interesting. And of course, Juri's like, well, shit. And I feel bad for Juri because in Juri's mind in this moment, she's like, oh, great. Shiori's back. Shiori doesn't know that I loved her. And she also isn't interested in me. So I'm just going to have to be tortured by her in real time. Instead of her being thousands of miles away or however far the distance was, she's like, now she's right here torturing me from 5 feet away. Awesome. Cool. And I feel for Juri. And, oh, turn my sound back down here. And so then Shiori's like, oh, well, you know, me and Juri are just good friends. It's like, ugh. So anyway, we get to see the dorms. At first, I thought that she was moving in with Utena and Anthy, and I was like, what? But no, we actually see the dorms that she's moving into, and they help her move in. So that's a whole different scenario. I transferred back, and I'll be living in the dorms starting today. But she's like, I hope that you look after me anyway, even though I'm returning soon. And they're like, oh, yeah, sure. And then I like that Anthy offers Choo Choo as help as well. I'm glad that's very kind of Anthy to offer Choo Choo as assistance. Super cute. And they're like, oh, have you known Juri for a long time? Choo Choo had some really cute things in this episode, like Utena spinning him around on her finger and then him like clutched to her arm. Super cute. And she's like, have you known Juri for a long time? She's like, oh, yeah, you could say that. We're not just old friends. We practically grew up together. So, and she's like, Juri has always been so wonderful. So here's the thing. They have been childhood friends. Which, man, I feel like Saionji and Toga's relationship kind of mirrors Shiori and Juri's, except Juri is very openly in love with Shiori, and Saionji has repressed it. To where it's just a photo on his desk of just the two of them. No big deal. But anyway, she talks about how Juri has always been wonderful and strong and cool. And she didn't lie about that. She says that she's always viewed Juri as strong and cool, which is kind of similar to how Kozu viewed Miki as being the cooler one of the group. So we find out later that has harbored a jealous side of her. And here's the thing, with the complexity of people, I think even best friends, there can be sometimes a sense of jealousy. I know sometimes I've been jealous of my friends. It's not enough to make me want to hurt them. But I have been, you know, I feel like sometimes we all go through periods where we might be jealous or envious of someone. And you just have to step back and go, you know, what do we do about this? And typically with friends, you just, you know, you find a way to work around it and focus more on yourself. But she talks about she always protected me and she was my only friend. She was the only one I could trust wholeheartedly. So she said back then she was her only true friend that she trusted. Which is going to add to her own self-guilt later on when she talks about stealing the man that she thought Juri liked. And she's like, I don't have the right to expect that anymore. And then there's this big silence, this very long silence where it's kind of like, I thought for a second maybe the episode had like malfunctioned, but no, she thinks that she has lost that trust because she tried to hurt Juri by taking the boyfriend that she thought Juri wanted. In reality, Juri doesn't hate that she stole this man. She hates that Shiori is not going to return the affection that she has for her. She's like, yeah, I feel like she's like, Shiori's never going to love me like I love her, so that's why I'm mad at her. And she didn't realize that I loved her all back then. So then Utena's like, hey, what's going on? And she's like, I didn't mean to drone on like that. I do love Choo Choo, like just grip to her shoulder. And she's like, I don't have a roommate, so I could use the company. I'm like, well, maybe you should invite Juri to go stick around with you. So I'm sorry. I don't care. And then Anthe, when she says, I don't have the company, Anthe looks back at the window to see her there. I feel like Anthe can relate to Shiori in a way. I feel like Anthe relates to her loneliness, and she also relates to her not knowing what to do. Now, the question, of course, is who does Anthe relate? Who is Anthe's Juri is the question, right? Who does she relate to and look up to but feels kind of guilty about it? Is it Utena? Is it the prince? Is it Akio? We don't know, but I do feel like there's shots of Anthe looking back up at the dorm room at Shiori, and then her at the end telling Utena, no, she's not any different. This is how she is. I feel like Anthe kind of knows what's going on and finds like a kindred spirit there, which is so fascinating to me. Anyway, back at the crematorium in the end of the world laboratory down in the basement, I don't care if Mamiya and Soji end up being the two worst people in the world. I don't feel like they will be, but we'll see. I am all in on their angsty romance. I am all in on this. What's so fascinating to me is they have this orange rose. So we find out the roses originally are the actual colors, and I'm not throwing that toy, buddy, are the actual colors of the roses attached to the person. How they get these roses, I don't know. But maybe is Akio giving the roses to them? Who knows? But anyway, they have the rose, and then it becomes black over time through it getting poisoned, which is fascinating to me. So then he's like, oh, I pricked my hand. Oh, poor me. And Soji's like, I told you to be careful. So what's interesting to me is the more beautiful the rose, the more dangerous its thorns. I was like, yes, please. And him just like, I'm like, you, senpai, Soji, you didn't have to suck on the cut. You could have just pressed your hand and put some pressure there and did that. But no. Mm-mm. What gets me with it is that Soji does it, and then he says to him, he's like, well, you did it on purpose, didn't you? And Mamiya's like, maybe. I mean, I'm all for this relationship because Mamiya is very mutual about it. Soji's like, do you want to get it on? And Mamiya's like, kind of, yes. And so I'm like, yes, please. Awesome. Give me it. Give me this BL relationship. I'm here for it. And so like, we need this rose's thorns, don't we? And they're like, we do. The thorns from the most beautiful and most dangerous rose, we could defeat Utena. Not really, because Utena, like, there was not even a fight this time around. Oh, well. There wasn't even a battle this time around. It was like one move and we're done. I was really surprised. I thought that Shiori was going to put up more of a fight. But here's the thing. I feel like because Shiori's motivations were not directly tied to love, but were more tied to her envy and guilt, maybe it wasn't as powerful. I feel like maybe Kozu had a more mutual connection with Miki, and that's why it was more dangerous. Also, I feel like they were trying to cultivate something that wasn't authentic with the venom and the insect, and so maybe that was a problem as well. Anyway, so they're like, how do we go about removing the thorns so that you can actually have it? And I'm sorry, y'all. I am definitely on the A spectrum. You can watch the smuttiest of smuts, the porniest of porns. But to me, one of the most sensual things is anything involving hands. Like, hands have such a symbolic significance in stories and in real life. And Saionji just carefully, like, not even putting pressure on the prick because that's what you should be doing. Don't take that out of context. But just like stroking his hand rather than putting pressure on the injury. It's so sensual. So sensual. It's so sexy and sensual. And I'm like, yes, please. Even roses have natural enemies, which are pests. And he's like, oh, so an insect's venom. I'll work on it if it'll work on this rose. And I'm like, we already have a trap set. So their plan was that Shiori was going to be the venom. The venom from the insect that was going to hurt the rose. Which to me also signifies that it's not as powerful because it's not strengthening the rose, it's breaking it down. So I'm glad that Miki talks about his experience. Juri's not paying attention because she's too like heartbroken, which poor Juri. But telling Nanami, being like, oh, so your sister drew a sword from within you. Do I have that right? Nanami is underestimating this whole situation. And to me, that tells me that she's going to have a sword drawn from her by someone. Is it going to be by Toga? I would not be surprised, because I was trying to think this episode. I was like, how is Nanami going to possibly have a sword taken out of her? Because the logical next step is that we have to take it out of Toga. We have to take it out of Nanami. We've had a sword come out of Juri. We have a sword come out of Miki. Nanami is the only student council member yet, but the only person Nanami is connected to is Toga. I wouldn't be surprised if Toga in his, like, the last 3 episodes we've seen him, he's been like sinking lower into the floor and melting into it. I wouldn't be surprised if he got fed up or got lured to wherever all this is happening, and Soji uses Toga to get back at all of it. I wouldn't be surprised. And then Toga takes the sword from Nanami. The thing is, Nanami and Toga have an established relationship that is like kind of a combination of, you have Kozu and Miki, you have Juri and Shiori. Toga and Nanami are kind of a mixture of that. So maybe that's what needs to happen to possibly defeat Utena. I won't be surprised, but I feel like until Nanami sees it face to face, she's not going to believe Miki. She's not going to believe Juri. She's going to be like, well, I don't know. And then it's going to have to happen to her. And I'm like, girl, you turned into a cow last episode. What right do you have to question his validity? And she was wearing a black rose seal. And she's like, oh, well, I see. So someone aside from us is after the Rose Bride. Seems to be the case. And Mickey's like, yes. And she's like, well, I find that hard to believe. And Mickey's like, well, that's great that you find it that way, but I had a sword taken from my chest, made from my soul. That's our reality. It's a powerful enemy. We probably need to be taking this rather seriously. And Nanami's just like, well, you know, you let your guard down. So I'm like, damn it, Nanami! I wish she'd take this more seriously, but I'm not surprised that she's not. And Mickey's like, well, I let my guard down because it was unexpected. It was my sister. I feel like Nanami is going to have this happen to her for her to be like, okay, well, never mind. Although, here's the thing. If we didn't want to get Toga involved, then someone else that could draw the sword from Nanami would be Tsubaki. I'm like, you leave that little middle school kid alone, that elementary school alone. You leave him alone. But I won't be surprised if Kiryu stays a puddle and is collecting mushrooms in his corner, then it won't surprise me if they use Tsubaki to get the sword from Nanami. That would actually make a lot more sense now that I'm thinking about it, because Toga going down and seeing Soji seems like a big revolutionary thing, no pun intended, that could bring about some actual damage. Tsubaki is expendable to them. So, it probably will be Tsubaki next to get it out of Nanami. And then Nanami will be like, oh, okay. And then, I'm theorizing here, and then Nanami and Miki and Juri could go to Toga and be like, hey, this stuff's happening. You want to come out from your closet and come help us? I don't know. That's just my theory. We'll see if it all plays out. But I love that Nanami has the stopwatch, and she's like, hey, you're always doing this thing. What does it mean? And Miki goes, is this interrogation finished? And I'm like, damn it. That's just for the animators and the creator to go, don't question us. We're just doing it for fun. How dare they? How dare they taunt us meta in our face? How dare they? So anyway, poor Juri, she's really sad about all this and thinking about the friend and thinking about her feelings. And then, like, you're first in his thoughts. And so I hope you don't feel bad, because I absolutely have no regret stealing him from you. And then she breaks up with him because, imagine that, it doesn't work out. You must hate me for being this kind of person. And Juri's like, well, I don't hate you for taking this man. I hate you because you thought I liked him, and you did it to hurt me, when what hurt me more was the fact that you didn't acknowledge that I loved you. And so then I like all these kids, like, run away, like, run around them to show there's people hanging around. And she's like, well, wait, Juri. And she's like, hold on. And Juri won't listen to her. Until they go to this balcony, which, by the way, is gorgeous. This whole palace school grounds have, like, some of the best views. But yeah, So she's like, well, I broke up with him. I broke up with him, but that doesn't change the fact that I stole him from you. So she just did it, as she points out, she just did it to make Juri sad, which is a really shitty thing to do, right? And she feels bad about it. And she's like, I don't think that you'll forgive me, so I don't, she's like, I wish we could return to back when we were, getting along as friends before all of that. And I was expecting Juri to clench her fist, but she doesn't. So instead, Shiori is like, as soon as I got back here, I felt nostalgic and thought, every last corner of the school is so full of memories. And those times were so much fun. So they did go to this school. So they were in this middle school. Okay. She just left and now she's back. Mm-hmm. And then Juri's like, well, is that all you wanted to say? She's like, I'm not gonna, you know what? And I respect Juri. I really do, because I feel like if I was in Juri's position, I would totally do the same. And I would be like, and I can kind of relate to Juri a little bit, because I had someone that I did like for a while, and they told me to their face, they told me to my face that they didn't like me that way. And I was like, okay, cool. And so then we were still friends. But then after a couple of years, they were like, well, actually, maybe I do like you. And it was just like, it tore my heart up, because I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then after like a week, they were like, actually, no. And I was so done at that point that I just had to be like, and we're friends now. We've cooled off. We're friends now. They're married. It's what it is. But there was a moment where I was like, I have to get away from you, because I still like you. And this whole back and forth wishy-washiness. I can't do it. I can't. And so I feel for Juri in this moment. And at the end, when she says, I wish I was stronger, even if I could throw it away. Because I went through that too. I was like, it's so hard when you're like, you have this unrequited love, and then someone plays with your heart and messes with you, and you want to let them go completely, but you still care about them enough that you can't let them go completely. And that's how my relationship with that person was. So I feel where Juri is coming from. And it is nice that this show represents all different kinds of relationships, even the ones that don't work out, because it is bittersweet, but it's realistic. So then the bird hits the window, right? The bird is no longer free. It hits the window, and she's like, I never had feelings for him, so I was never in love with him, so there's nothing for you to be concerned about. And then she's like, well, whose picture's in the locket? And it's like, oh, well, I'm not going to give you the answer to that question. And I'm like, Shiori, you have to know whose picture it is if it's not his. So then Utena is like, you were talking with Shiori, and Utena is very innocent, like Akio and Anthy point out, where she's like, I don't know the story, but, you could just forgive her, right? And I'm like, I love Utena, but I'm like, girl, I don't know if this is your place to get involved in this, because if you don't know the story, don't be telling people to forgive people, because you don't know how deep or serious this is. And she's like, oh, well, she seems like a nice girl, and you all used to be close, right? So I think she really trusts you. And Juri, I like that Juri is like, you know what? I'm not going to be mad at you, Utena. You're kind of like Shiori. You're very innocent. You're cruelly innocent. And I feel like, and what's funny is Shiori is not cruelly innocent. She, just doesn't quite understand Juri. In Juri's mind, she believes that Shiori doesn't understand all of Juri's emotions about the situation. And Utena is the same way. They mean well, but it's not any of her business, as she says. And Utena's like, I just don't want drama in this school. So what is baffling to me is that she goes to Akio to talk about all of this. I'm like, girl, why are you going to Akio? And I feel like it's because in her mind, Akio is not like Anthy. Anthy, I feel like there is a part of Utena that if she gives her complaints to Anthy, one, Anthy's not very talkative, and so she's not going to give her a lot of feedback. Two, I think Utena also realizes that with Anthy being the Rose Bride, maybe her opinions might be spun a certain way based on her being with Utena, but we'll talk about that at the end of the episode. And she does find Akio, since he's Anthy's older brother, to be wiser and filled with more possible good advice. But I'm like, girl, stop going to Akio and telling him all of your problems. You are literally giving the enemy everything he needs to know. She's giving Akio all this information that he could possibly tie back to Soji and Mamiya, even though I don't think he has enough to do that yet. I think it might lead to that point if she keeps going to talking to him. But also, you're just, because Utena goes to him so often, he's getting an idea of who Utena is, and he could use that against her. And I'm like, oh, girl, why are you doing that? So anyway, the stars are all up and everything, and there's the planetarium. She didn't have to say it like that for one. I'm just so baffled. And he's like, well, you're like Ganymede, the boy in the constellation Aquarius. Innocent and pure. But such innocence can hurt others. You should be careful. I don't think he's wrong there, because I think what he's getting at is, if you don't know the full story and you're just trying to help thinking you're being nice, sometimes butting into other people's businesses can be more harmful than good. But I don't trust Akio at all. And I feel like he's going to hurt Utena in the end. Probably worse than Toga, if possible. He's like, everyone has something they want no one to pry into. Yeah, and so him saying that there, it's like he doesn't want Utena to get into him and Anthy's little private affairs. And he's kind of hinting at that here, just like saying that Juri doesn't want people to pry into her sexuality. And Utena's like, okay, is that the way that it works? But I feel like, Akio sounds like he's helpful, but I feel like he could be poison in himself by giving her advice that maybe doesn't fit the situation best. But I like Juri spreading the layers and like giving herself the bath. And then, of course, that's when Mamiya says the venom is starting to spread through the rose, like it's killing it. Getting it to where it could be used. And soon the rose will offer us its thorns. Anyway, so Juri throws the locket away because she doesn't believe that it needs to be. She throws it away, being like, you know what? I'm just gonna avoid her, be done with it, whatever. And I'm amazed at the search and rescue operation procedures at Soji. What if Soji was just like scuba diving, snorkeling under the water's surface, and then when Juri threw the locket, he just found it, was like, haha. Or maybe Mamiya did it. Who knows? I say not Mamiya because Mamiya plucks the rose. And she's like, I don't believe in miracles. Which is super sad. The bird looking up is so creepy. And the fact that somebody's been in her room, super creepy. I feel for Juri, because Juri kind of has this moment of no miracles. But I think there's also like human intervention to play into that. Because here's the thing. True. I think that Juri's miracle that she wants is for Shiori to be in love with her and for it all to work out. And that doesn't seem like it's going to be the case. Which, one, does not necessarily mean that miracles aren't possible. It's just like, there's that. But there's also the side to it that Juri is not taking any action herself to possibly make that miracle happen. If Shiori had to find out about the locket and everything through Soji and Mamiya, and then Juri never told her about it. So I'm like, it's one of those things like Schrodinger's cat. It's never going to happen or not happen if you don't open the box. So if Juri doesn't take action, it will never come to pass. It's always going to be like, because you don't know what the other person knows or doesn't know about you. So even best friends have parts of themselves they don't reveal to others. So it's like, if you're not talking about it, it's not going to be known. So anyway, then she finds the locket. What my whole thing was, how she gets from the locket to the interview hall. That's the one thing that we don't know about. We obviously know from the fiancé, she ends up going there. We don't know how Kozu got there. That's the one element that you kind of have to suspend your disbelief on, being like, well, how'd she know about the interview office and get to Nemuro Memorial Hall from there? Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, I do like this idea of as Shiori goes down the elevator, she has this existential crisis where she told Utena, I mean, she didn't necessarily say that she loved Juri. She did say she was cool and everything, but she says here that she's hated Juri since they were kids because she's been jealous of her and saying she was talented and beautiful and popular and I was jealous of what she had. And then she's like, that's right. Like she's trying to convince herself, being like, I loved him because I wanted to take something away from her and hurt her. That was all I was after. But then she says, when they say to go deeper, and that's when she says, well, wait, no, that's not right. She's like, Juri was always kind to me. And says, I thought that was her way of making fun of me. That she was being kind because she pitied me, because I was worthless. So she talks about how she's had all this self-doubt and really thought that Juri was mocking her. And so she wanted to get back. Now, the show doesn't come outright and say that Shiori actually liked Juri or had a crush on her or anything like that. It's not explicit, and I'm okay with that, especially with the ending of the episode. But I think that Shiori has a lot of problem with her own self-doubt, with self-loathing, with misinterpreting Juri's kindness and being jealous of her. And then from there, she's like, it made me feel pathetic. And she's like, I wanted my relationship with her to change, but what I did with him made me even more miserable. So she's like, I wanted, to change the relationship with her because it was making me feel bad, but getting with him was definitely a mistake. And I realized that. I thought that was what I wanted, but now she and I are even. She's like, she always had a special place in my heart. And she's like, my friend's secret. She suffered all alone, ogling at my picture in secret. But then she gets mad at herself because she's like, it's wrong for me to be happy at her sadness, because she's like, this is just proving that she did care about me all this time. And if I'm jealous and happy and elated at her sorrow, what does that say about me? So she has all these conflicting emotions going about the situation. And she says that it's wrong. And she's like, how could you look at me like that? And why did things turn out this way? And that's when Soji, shows up and is like, you're going to be one of our soldiers. So I'm surprised that we don't see Shiori with the black rose on, because that's been with all the other ones. So that's curious to me. But then Juri's like, how'd you get that locket? And then Juri feels really sad. And I appreciate Juri saying, like, hey, don't mess with me. Don't lead me on. Like, that's not fair of you to do so. And she's like, you were supposed to be stronger than everyone else. But she's like, I made you weak. And then, of course, that's when she takes the sword out. The sword coming out of Juri is a lot more sexually explicit in its presentation than with Miki. But Miki's a middle schooler, so we'll let it slide. So then, of course, I like that Utena's like, son of a bitch, now I gotta go fight somebody. Every time. She's going, we're gonna run out of student council members, right? So then we have the Shadow Girls that basically come here saying, oh, my secret was found out. And they're like, well, it's not that big of a secret. And they're like, people have, much odder secrets than that. And they're like, but this secret's scandalous. And they're like, it's gonna change how I'm viewed. And they're like, well, what should I do? And they're like, well, then get rid of the secret. Don't make it a secret anymore. I feel like that's the big lesson of it is, don't bury these feelings deep inside of you and keep them secret, because one, they're eventually going to come out. And two, they're not that big of a deal. They're more of a deal than you're making it. And three, they're easily remedied. So I feel like that's the message from the Shadow Girls. But anyway, let's go up here and see what these song lyrics are about, shall we? I love the birds. The birds on the little perches are great. And Utena's like, what are you doing? And she's like, why are you like this? And she's like, this is the real me, not the loser living in the life of misery in the shadow of the blinding radiant Juri. I like the Anthy looks there. She's like, this is the real me, the me who controls Juri. Again, that idea of being the prince and having executive power, right? So I feel like what Shiori has wanted all along has been independence and to not be influenced by her emotions surrounding Juri, which is maybe why Anthy feels connected to Shiori, because maybe what Anthy wants is independence and not being connected to someone. Now, I think that person that Anthy would like to be not connected to is Akio, not Utena, but we'll just have to wait and see. So anyway, we start this lovely song. It says, two opposites infinitely reflect one another. I'm talking about Juri and in a space between two mirrors. So you see the mirrors, you see the reflections on either side, which is cool because it talks about the two wolves, the complex relationships within one another. That's all listed there. Revealing their desires. Interestingly enough, I was going to talk about this during the episode, but the idea that Anthy is the Rose Bride and that her sword is drawn out by someone that is connected to her. Now, the thing about it is, with all of the faux Rose Brides that Mamiya and Soji have made, the connection has always been something genuine or at least tangible, like, oh yeah, these characters are connected because of their relationships in the past. The thing about being the Rose Bride is the Rose Bride, because you're engaged to someone, it kind of like makes it to where it's, ironically enough, sort of an artificially created bond, except I feel like with Utena and Anthy, it's real, but like with Saionji and her, with Juri and her, whatever, anybody that can pull the sword out of Anthy has that connection to them, but it could be artificially created just because they're the winning duelist, like with Toga and Anthy and Saionji and Anthy before. So that's interesting to me. And then the ones that it seems like Soji and Mamiya are trying to create the same thing, and maybe they're just testing all these people until they get it right, and then they're going to make it Mamiya. So interesting. But yeah, revealing their desires, and then their fickle cruelty and their lies. Yeah, there's a lot of lies going on in this episode between a lot of parties involved. So then the bells ring and we start our duel, and it says, oh, there is not a soul. That says, oh, in the darkness. And then Utena's like, I thought you really admired Juri. Why are you doing this? And this, oh, the sound of waves. And she's like, because I know Juri isn't what everyone thinks she is. And I'm like, well, Shiori is correct about that. She's figured out Juri is not the calm, composed, powerful woman that she exudes. She actually has a lot of internal emotions. Juri reminds me a lot of a character from Bloom Into You, who is trying to put on this persona of power and calmness and collectiveness, but is under the surface very tortured by their inner emotions. You should go watch Bloom Into You to figure out who that is. I'm not going to spoil it, but she's like, I know Juri isn't what she thinks she is. Just as shadows exist only through light, I only exist in opposition to myself. And Shiori says, and that I'm stronger than her. The thing about it is, with the shadows existing through light, that kind of ties to the idea that despite our complexities, despite our guilt or jealousy or anger, we exist in opposition to that. So that could tie into the idea of Shiori not necessarily fully meaning those emotions, but they are there, right? And then says, the reason for the onset of my loneliness is that I only exist in opposition to myself. And it's that idea about giving into desires. And it's like, if you know something's wrong, you don't do it. But that also can create a sense of loneliness. So again, that seems like it ties to Anthy. Anthy wants to do things, but she's not able to, and that creates loneliness. So fun times with this song. It says twins, sworn twins. And I don't know if the sworn twins can refer to Akio and Anthy, to the prince. Lots of options. Lots of mechanical twins. Non-existent twins. And then at that point, it's like mechanical, non-existent. Then who knows? To make the invisible visible. A mechanical world comes into view with instruments of wonder and optical illusions. So it's like, in order to reveal all of these desires, in order to reveal all of these things, in that case, we're going to create all of these illusions and sense of wonderment in this world to help illustrate and bring those out. Possibly. I'm surprised the prince came down as easily as he did. He just popped into view, and all the birds looking up at him like, oh, hey, here he is. And then he helps her to crush the rose. Boom, there we go. The Earth is a museum of personas. Oh my God, I love that. The Earth as a museum of personas is such a good way to describe it. Yes, please. Love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. The Earth is a museum of personas. Love. I'm all here for that. That's great. So, I love it because we all put on persona. We all put on a mask, right? In various forms. Love it. The Earth is a display cabinet of personas. Oh, even better. It's just public. Everybody can see everybody's personas. But like Akio says, everyone has secrets that they're hiding. And then you see the birds fly away and you see Anthy just staring. Like Anthy would probably love to be able to fly away and have the freedom, but she doesn't get to have that right now. Damn. The Earth is a... Ah, love it. And that's where it ends. Damn. Okay. What is the Earth? Is it a persona itself? Is it an illusion? Who knows? Anyway, there goes another cremation. And Soji's like, well, son of a bitch, that one failed too. And he's like, but we've now learned that by using the power of love, we can poison hearts. So surely we'll be able to use it again. And then Juri wakes up. Juri's so pretty. They draw her really well. So we have Shiori with her other set of friends. And she's there. And Utena's like, well, she looks like a whole different person than she did the other day. But Anthy says, do you really think so? She's no different. Not even a little bit. I love that Utena's kind of like, oh, you were speaking up, Anthy. What? Because that's so true. It's Anthy pointing out, being like, no, she is the same person she's always been. She's just complex, like we all are. And I'm like, oh, shit. I feel like that's Anthy trying to tell Utena that, hey, there's stuff under the surface with me too, that don't think I'm any different just because I'm not showing you it. And Utena's like, oh, okay. So then she sees Juri and she's like, oh, hi, Juri. And Juri says hi back. Of course, she doesn't remember anything else happening. And then she keeps on walking. And the bittersweet part is that Juri, like, just keeps walking there. And as she talks to us in her monologue, she says, in the end, it's back in my hands. Even though I managed to throw it away. Why can't I be stronger? So she still has the locket. Yeah. And I feel for Juri. I felt very bittersweet because I thought after she woke up in the moonlight that her and Shiori would have a conversation later, but not yet. Doesn't seem to be the case. It's definitely more bittersweet and melancholy than Miki, because at least Miki and Kozu are siblings, so they stay in the same house, so they have the opportunity to like talk with one another, and their story ended with that whole experience bringing them closer together. I feel like in the long run, this experience will be better for Juri, but Juri is, kind of being like, I wish I was strong enough to make that first move and say something to connect with Shiori. And I feel like Juri might eventually get there. Maybe this will end up helping her do that in the long run, but what a crazy good episode! Oh my god! Ah! What a good episode! Oh, I mean, Nanami's the last one. If we're going to use student council members, Nanami's the last one unless we bring Saionji back into this, which he's been expelled, so I am so curious. And we're on episode 17. So theoretically, if, episodes, we got 39 episodes altogether. We had technically 13 to start us out. So that left us 26. And then if we had 13 episodes, we had 13 more. I mean, there's your 39 right there. Is that so? Episode 26 would be the next one where the final arc starts. But I don't think. Here's the thing. I feel like by episodes 18 or 19, we're going to take a turn. I feel like next episode or the episode after that, we're going to take a turn because we can't keep having the same thing here for 10 more episodes. So I feel like the final act, we're going to have to do some turns with Soji and Mamiya after they try. I feel like they're going to try with Nanami to do the same thing they've been doing, and Tsubaki might be the way to go about it. But then after that, by the time we get to episode 20, I feel like things are going to have to take a shift for an arc before we get to the final act. Right? Maybe? Possibly. With this show? Who knows? So, I'm very curious to see your thoughts down below. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yes, I'll be back next week with episode 18 of Revolutionary Girl Utena. Bye.